To order the meeting of the Truckee Meadows 2018 at 2 p.m. And we will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
I'm going to call Jenny real quick as well.
Okay, good idea.
Hello, this is Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. Is Damien here from Regional Planning?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We're going to start with a roll call. Jenny Breckus?
I am here, calling in again.
Naomi
Even though
Deere.
I professed I would never call in again.
Naomi Dewar?
Here.
Bonnie Weber?
Here.
Marsha Burke-Bigler?
Here.
Charlene Bybee? Here. David Bobzine? Donald Abbott?
Here.
Ed Lawson? Vaughn Hartung?
Present.
Jean Herman? And non-voting member Veronica Frankel.
Thank you very much. Sounds like we have a quorum. And I have a pen that doesn't want to work once again. I'll pull one out. I'm going to ask Commissioner Herman if she would lead us in the salute to the pledge. Please, Ms. Herman.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman. And with that, I'm looking for an agenda for approval. I'm looking for a motion for approval of the agenda. Oh, thank you. Approval of the agenda.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you. And then I am looking for a motion for approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes?
There are none.
No, okay. There are no changes to the minutes?
The only thing is, it might have been more clearly stated. I think I mentioned under agenda item 9, request for future agenda items. It says member Dewar requested a future agenda item for information on possible changes to the regional plan to address process issues discussed under agenda 7B. And I was specifically speaking about schools and transportation corridors. So
Right.
agenda item 7B was so big that I further identified that, so.
Okay. Is that acceptable to everybody? I think that's the way I remember it. All right, so do we have any public comment? Although this is, no.
I have none for this item.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favor of approval of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thanks, Jenny. Opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we will go to public comment.
I have one. Tammy Holtstill.
Ms. Holstill.
Tammy Holstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. Yesterday was a very interesting day. Our perspective on it is city staff were whining and sniveling about what the Planning Commission had voted regarding the Echeverry project, and they didn't like the way that the Planning Commission had voted for regional. So they, as far as I'm concerned, sniveled to the commissioners and our council people, and they voted to approve what the process is going to be to try and overturn what the Planning Commission for the governing board did. What's the use in having a governing or having a regional board, whether it's planning or governing, if the entities aren't going to use the tools in front of them? And it's very disappointing to see, to me, it looked like arm twisting. And it was nice to have at least one council person felt that regional should take the lead on it because regional made a vote on it, and that the city should be trying to fight a battle for a development. And they are. And I don't think it was right, and I'm disappointed. That's the best I can say on that is, you guys are supposed to be here to protect our county based upon the NRS. And we have not seen that as residents. It's proven it with the way that the infrastructures are. One of the things that's going to be coming up before the city before too long is another project that was denied by the city in 2015, the city of Reno. That project is coming back to be approved again with no changes, no infrastructure changes, and it was denied in 2015 for the same reasons that it should be denied now. And the only reason it's not coming to governing board is because it's not of major significance, but it is of major significance when there's 6 warehouses and apartment buildings and 175 homes. So it is a PUD, so it should be of significance. And you should all be looking at it. And you should be protecting the citizens of this county, not what's best for the individual governmental entities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more public comment?
I have none.
Okay, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. And we are ready for the consent agenda. Madam Executive Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the consent agenda, item A for possible action, local government status report regarding detailed recommendations for the implementation of concurrency. And item B for possible action, possible adoption of the advanced schedule of RPGB meeting dates for the calendar year 2019.
Any questions, concerns from any of the commissioners? Do we have any public comment?
I have none yet.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, motion carries with no one in opposition. Madam Executive Director.
Item 7, business of the day. Item A, for possible action, RPGB Resolution 18-07 for appreciation of the service of Veronica Frankel as the Washoe County School District Liaison to the RPGB. And with your
Yes, please.
approval,
If
I
you
will
would
read.
please read the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution of appreciation for the services of Veronica Frankel, Washoe County School District Liaison to the Regional Planning Governing Board. Whereas Veronica Frankel served as the Washoe County School District Liaison to the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Governing Board from February 2015 through December 2018, providing thoughtful commentary to the Regional Planning Governing Board, the Regional Planning Commission, and the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. And whereas Veronica Frankel, during her tenure as the School District Liaison to the Regional Planning Governing Board, partnered in bringing together the first shared work program for the RPGB and the school district, which resulted in the 2016 Truckee Meadows Housing Study, a product that has and is being used throughout the region for housing discussions. And whereas Veronica Frankel also fostered communication and shared work products between TMRPA staff and school district staff to project future population and associated school needs. And whereas Veronica Frankel helped to communicate the projected school needs and the progress of the WC1 school facilities effort. And whereas Veronica Frankel participated in the discussions on regional planning issues and carried this information back to the school district board of trustees and staff. And whereas Veronica Frankel always brought her thoughtful and engaging style to the meetings. And whereas Veronica Frankel was our trusted trustee and always dressed for success. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Regional Planning Governing Board does hereby extend its sincere appreciation to Veronica Frankel for serving as the Washoe County School District Liaison to the Regional Planning Governing Board and for her countless hours of public service on behalf of the citizens of the Truckee Meadows.
Thank you very much. We've appreciated you being here, and we will miss you. Thank you. Yes,
Can I make a comment?
of course.
I would just like to thank Veronica for her role that she played and how important I think it was that we added a school district liaison to this regional planning governing board. I think it's a valuable communication and connection between the job that we do and between the schools, especially given our growth, given the expansion of schools, how we work as a region, and its impact on planning for the region, and how important the Washoe County School District is as a part of that. So even though it's not a voting member position, I think it's critical that we maintain that, and I think Veronica was an excellent representative, just brought thoughtful, positive input always, and communicated what we were doing to the school district. And I don't think there can be too much communication between all of our entities across the county and across the region. So I appreciate the work that you've done, and I'm going to miss you on the School Board of Trustees. I think you were a valuable asset to our region and to the schools, and wishing you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bybee. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it any better than Commissioner Bybee, but I think, Verona, I think you hit on a couple key points, and as can be seen even on today's agenda, we're talking about how can we better collaborate and coordinate with the school district on the placement of schools, both the benefits and impacts of schools. And so having the position is critical for that, especially going forward. So we became aware, probably because of your participation, of the need for that. And then second, you hit it on the head, which is I hate seeing you go off the school board. I think you already know that on a personal level. So I think you've done a fantastic job. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dewar. Veronica, do you have something you want to add? Oops.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I've been part of these conversations for the past almost 4 years. You all serve such an important role for our community, and I've appreciated the passion, the intensity, the thoughtfulness, and the collaboration that I've seen here. It's much needed in our community and in our country to have these kinds of dialogues that we have, and so it's been really an honor for me to be here. And I am very pleased that the schools have become a greater part of the conversations that you have. It's such a growing need in our community, and been excited to have had the opportunity to be a part of this during the WC1 construction process and bring that information to you. And I know many of you have served on our Capital Funding Protected Committee and still do, and I thank you for your collaboration and support of the district. So thank you on behalf of our district.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anyone else? We really appreciate it, and we will miss you. We need a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment?
I have none for this item.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Jenny. All right, motion carries. Thanks, Veronica. Okay.
Madam Chair, item 7B for possible action. We have a public hearing, Regional Plan Amendment RPA 18-005, possible adoption of RPGB Resolution 18-06 regarding an amendment to the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan to transfer 2 contiguous parcels totaling approximately 3.04 acres from Washoe County's portion of the TMSA to the City of Reno's portion of the TMSA and sphere of influence. The subject parcels are located on the south side of Holcomb Ranch Lane, approximately 644 feet west of South Virginia Street, and you have Nate Kusha here to do a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. For the record, Nate Kusha, Regional Planning. This agenda item discusses the Sierra Manor TMSA amendment and can be found starting on page 35 of your packet. Overhead is a map showing the general location of the subject site. The Reno City Council sponsored this regional plan amendment on September 12th, 2018, and on November 14th, 2018, the Regional Planning Commission moved to approve RPC Resolution 18-07, recommending that the board adopt the proposed amendment. So this request seeks to transfer 2 contiguous parcels totaling roughly 3.04 acres from Washoe County's portion of the TMSA to the City of Reno's portion of the TMSA and sphere of influence. Overhead is a map of the project site. As you can see on this slide, the site is currently located in Washoe County's portion of the TMSA and is adjacent to the current City of Reno TMSA on 3 sides. Policy 1.1.7.1 describes a calculation for determining the acreage allowance within each jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA. The City of Reno currently has 47.46 acres of TMSA capacity available. If this request is approved, they'd be left with 44.42 acres of capacity. As a tool to better analyze TMSA amendments, TMRPA staff uses the TMSA evaluation matrix, which is attachment 5 to your staff report. Also, for any regional plan amendment, policy 4.3.6 of the regional plan requires that items listed on the slide to be considered, and this can be found in your packet on page 36. A majority of the evaluation matrix discusses the criteria above for each of the top review factors. The full analysis was included as part of your staff report. For this presentation, we'll briefly touch on each of these topics. In terms of regional form and pattern, the site is currently within Washoe County's portion of the TMSA and is already anticipated for development. The proposed site is directly adjacent to an existing residential area, and staff believes that synergy between the development and the proposed amendment site would exist. The amendment site currently has a land use designation of large lot neighborhood, and staff anticipates minimal impact to the overall jobs housing balance. As previously mentioned, the subject property is already in the TMSA and is contemplated for future development, and necessary infrastructure and facilities are in place on adjacent parcels. As previously noted, the subject property is located in the TMSA, which is the area where municipal infrastructure and levels of service to support urban and suburban development are allowed per the regional plan. Public services to serve the site exist adjacent to the amendment site. Services existing include transit along South Virginia Street, as well as police and fire services provided by the City of Reno. The applicant has also provided a fiscal impact analysis, which shows that if the land were to be developed under the current land uses, it would net positive. The amendment site does lie within a FEMA 100-year floodplain. However, the City of Reno Master Plan Concurrency Management System requires that new development must demonstrate compliance with the Reno Municipal Code floodplain management and drainage regulations and all pertinent state and federal regulations before occupancy of each structure. Also, new development must be consistent with the Regional Water Management Plan. No other natural resource constraints were identified on the amendment site. Regional planning staff recommends that the governing board consider the regional plan amendment as described in the staff report and adopt RPGB Resolution 18-06. You can find a suggested motion on the screen above or on page 38 of your packet. And this concludes my presentation, and Team RPA staff as well as City of Reno staff are available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any questions? Commissioner Dewar, Commissioner Dewar, that'll
Yeah,
work.
good job. Not a question, just a comment. I've been working with this development team and the surrounding neighbors, which is at a city-county boundary, for I feel like about 2 years. And it's been a very extensive process. You know, there was real challenges with bringing this forward, even though we're talking about 3 acres. But it was basically, to be honest, the county residents who are on about 1 home per acre did not want to see an intensification right next door. And they're just a few lots away from Virginia Street, which has commercial on it. And so the compromise was to have a transitional zone from the 1 home per acre down to the commercial. And I don't know what the ending up final discussion was, but anyway, it went to, instead of, it was already zoned where they could have put a 60-unit apartment building right on the site, right next to homes on 1 home per acre. It ends up with about 18 homes on about 3, I think it's about 4 acres. 18 units and 1 home.
Correct. It'll be about three homes on the 3-acre parcel.
Yeah. So it seemed to make sort of a logical transition from, you know, larger lot, which was in the county, to the commercial, which was in the city. It was not without some hazards. I mean, there was legal actions involved. There was lots of meetings. But I think ultimately they came up with a really good project, and so it'd be an honor at this point, having put a lot of skin in this game to get us where we are, to sponsor this TMSA amendment.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? Do we have any public comment? I'm sorry, Commissioner Hartung.
I'm sorry, I just have a question again. Nate, tell me, how many homes total on the 3 acres?
They're looking at, well, it's actually 4 acres.
So
Why
they
don't you
have-
explain?
They have, this site that they're looking to get into the City of Reno's portion of TMSA is 3 acres. 3 acres. The developer owns another acre that is
Okay,
already
all
in
right,
City of
okay,
Reno's
okay.
portion of the TMSA.
That was what was unclear to me.
And
is
so what they were
how we
trying to
coming
do
up
is
with
be
4
in
acres.
either the city or the county. Their property that they had together was split, and so it could have gone either way. And so the compromise was to get one lot that looks, so we'd have lot matching, one lot that looks like the county lots, that's 1 home per acre, and the rest of the property, this 3 acres, ended up with about 18 townhomes. And one of the things too, I mentioned it was in the floodplain, they're working very closely to basically retain on site any stormwaters that would be coming through. They've identified an area on their site at the downward side of their site to keep that stormwater, and that was really important too. And they've also allowed, they may have to use some of that land on the 1 acre, the 1 house per acre for additional retention. So all of those details will come forth in a tentative map if this is approved. But we felt that in fact, I think that they're actually going to improve the flooding for the people in the county, even though they're uphill and upstream, by being able to reroute the water off some people's lots. So that was my understanding of the improvements to all sides.
Okay,
For clarification, I believe that the land use designation on site would be large lot neighborhood 1 acre, and that would be 1 home per acre. So
Right.
it's 1 per acre on the 3 acres, which amounts in 3 homes.
okay.
So say that again.
So for the 3 acres that are coming into the City of Reno's portion
Right.
of the TMSA, it's 1 per acre.
Right, so they would have to come back, get a master plan amendment, a zoning, to be able to upsize it. But we always like to look forward, where are you going with all this? And what's your end game? And so
Correct.
a lot of that was discussed during this process.
Right. And that would require a master plan amendment, which would come back to the Planning Commission for a conformance review as well.
Okay. Any other commissioner questions? Do we have any public comment?
I have none for this item.
Okay. Well, and then Commissioner Dewar, would you like to make?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to sponsor or move that we accept the change to the TMSA for this parcel, or this set of parcels.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, motion carries. Madam Executive Director.
Madam Chair, item 7C for possible action, discussion, consideration, and possible action to direct the Regional Planning Commission and/or TMRPA staff to develop a new RPC resolution adopting guidelines for the definition of projects of regional significance pursuant to NRS 278.0277 to include development of land for a public or private school as a PRS. For this item, we have an introduction from our legal counsel, and then from that point, Laura Knox will be Nope, sorry. Apparently, I will be ready to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Azevedo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, Norm Azevedo. During the most recent utility corridor amendment process, several board members requested that a discussion and a matter be placed on their agenda addressing what constitutes a project of regional significance. And then, with the permission of the chair, this matter has been placed on your agenda today. By statute, the Nevada legislature has given the Regional Planning Agency, more specifically the Regional Planning Commission, the authority to define what constitutes a project of regional significance. The statutes, do set forth certain items or certain projects that constitute a project of regional significance by itself. But in addition to that, the RPC has the authority to adopt guidelines as to what constitutes such a project. And as part of your attachment to the staff report, you have the current guidelines as drafted, and those have been in place for my 20-year tenure with the body. They've been amended over time, but it gives this body the authority to, if something pops up, for example, a school, and you decide it's appropriate to add to the list, you can do so. And the one thing that I would add for your deliberations is legally, any project that is deemed to be a project of regional significance by either statute or the guidelines has to come to this body, specifically the RPC, and have its project found in conformance with the plan prior to the commencement of construction. So it's just kind of an odd little quirk in the statutes for this agency, but I wanted to throw that out there for you. And at that juncture, if you have any questions in your deliberations.
I'll raise my hand.
Okay.
Yeah?
Commissioner Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. As we mentioned when we were going over the minutes, I asked for this item to be on the agenda specifically for a couple reasons. And a lot of other people had been apparently discussing it as well, or the possibility. But South Reno, which is my council area, my ward, has been experiencing for the last 4 years the greatest growth pretty much in the region. That's going to be shifting to North Valleys probably. But up till now, it's been us. And that there's been a tremendous amount of school crowding. There have been a lot of questions about where the new schools would be located. I had a very contentious school that was to be located within Ward 2. And it was a public charter school. And they were proposing to locate 1,000 students on a 5-acre parcel, which is very different than what the school board standards would be. In fact, it was only about a block or two from Damani Ranch High School, which I believe is like 2,500 students on, I've heard 60 acres, but I don't know the actual number. Yeah, but it's much, much bigger. So we had, about half the students of Damani on about, a tenth, let's say, or 20, about 25% of the land. And it would have been embedded within a residential area like it was an elementary school. And there was no parking anywhere near the school. It would have effectuated needed changes on big arterials like Rio Wrangler, putting a whole roundabout, new lights, and lots and lots of challenges for that neighborhood. The ultimate resolution was the county stepped forward and had a piece of land, and they were able to find a site for the school that was on a little bit bigger piece of land that had bigger roads around it, parking options, and those kind of things. So it ended up being a city-county issue, and it kind of tied up the city for a while. There were a number of hearings or appeals. Finally, the developer actually withdrew the application at the city like 1 minute before the hearing. But there have been other challenges. I know we've talked about Wild Creek here, and that's obviously a school of regional significance. And there's a variety of schools. There's going to be more in the North Valleys coming. The South End, we've already had a number of elementary schools cited, and so on. So I was really thinking that, nobody wants to give up, I'm in charge kind of thing. And we made the decision in Reno on the school that I was just mentioning. But I do think that schools in particular have unique travel challenges, and they have other challenges as well, parking and just congestion and time of day issues. And I just thought, that we should consider having those kind of projects that have potential regional impacts, instead of waiting for it to be brought up here, be determined a project of regional significance, just acknowledge that it probably is a project of regional significance. And the question here, and I'm hoping we'll have a little debate, and my understanding is the avenue is if we decide to amend our criteria or to incorporate those kind of things, would be to send it back to the Regional Planning Commission for development of criteria, evaluation criteria findings that we'd be looking for, and then that would be coming back to us to adopt. So that's a process, I understand. But there's a question, if we do want to look at these schools. The school that I first mentioned was a combination elementary and middle school. The schools that seem to for sure have an impact regionally are high schools. So I thought one of the useful conversations here would be to see, does anyone else agree that probably schools, we all need to kind of agree on that? B, if so, what level of school, or is it size of school that's the main criteria? And what might trigger a review? So I just, by way of introduction, Madam Chair, I just wanted to share. There's more to come. I mean, there were transportation issues that will take another day, but this seemed like the most pressing.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very good summary of the whole overall issue. I know Commissioner Hartung has also had some interest in this issue, as I'm sure some of the other commissioners have. So, Commissioner Bybee.
So for clarification, as I'm reading the Regional Planning Commission's resolution on what constitutes a project of regional significance, it lists on the second page there, under following guidelines apply, 1A, down at the bottom, student population. So schools are already listed
Only if they increase.
If they're more-
325, I think, or
by
328.
300, student population by not less than 325 students. Does that mean an increase of or a student population
An
of
increase
more
of.
than 352 students?
So an increase of is my understanding.
An increase of students compared to what the school was before, or a school by itself that's more than, I'm unclear on what, and maybe Norm can help me, because
Mr.
that's
Acevedo, could you
that's
answer that
confusing
question?
to me.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair, that particular statutory language has been interpreted by the staff to mean a school that adds an additional 325 students. And so if you build a school that contains 325 students, like what discussion was at the utility corridor matter last time, there was discussion about school population remaining constant. You're going to be moving students from one school to another. These guidelines can further clarify that. You have a statutory provision, but if you want to enlarge it to include elementary, middle schools, or high schools in general, because that's a somewhat infrequent issue, you're more than glad to do that. But the current statutory language, so we're clear, only is applicable if you build a school that adds 325 or more new students.
So that would be 325 in addition to the previous year, or in addition to what the capacity of the school was built?
I'll defer to your director on that, how it's historically been administered.
Would it be the
Madam Chair, if I
capacity?
may.
yes,
The
sir.
conversation actually has been that it increases by 325 students, the population that is actually the student population overall. So in terms of the conversation, in the time that I have been here and what we have seen historically, and I may defer to Lauren because she's actually done the research on this one, but our understanding on this, the way this has been historically interpreted with legal counsel, is that it increases it overall. So not necessarily at the site, but increases overall. Do you have anything to add to that?
So that's a little, so you're saying that yearly, one school could be a project of regional significance one year and then not, or, Bud Beasley, when it grew, when my kids were there and it opened, and then it increased, but then another school opened and it decreased. That's kind of you know what I'm saying? I mean, for it to increase, is it that annually could be a very different number, both up and down. And I find problem with that compared to it just being a school, schools in general having regional significance because of traffic, because of the impacts. I mean, I kind of am going along, and obviously a high school for sure has a much bigger regional significance than our elementary schools do. So I'm confused on that, and it would seem like, in reality, I don't know if that's been the case, but it would have the potential with this language to change like next year, if all of a sudden one school increased by that much in 1 year, and what do we do about it if it's regional significance in a school that's already built? Or is it just, and what do we do when a school increases population if it becomes regional significance? How does that apply to us? And what things would happen on the planning level if that should occur?
Madam Chair, if I may, for the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. So the way that staff has interpreted the PRS guidelines and has worked with legal on this piece is if a project were to come in that then increased student population in an area by 325 students, that would create a PRS situation. So say a new housing development comes in and the amount of students generated by that development is 325 students or more, that would trigger a PRS.
And if I could follow up on that, if I may, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
So I think that's why this school that was going to be cited in my ward was not associated with a development. It was just a new school to meet existing needs, and even though it was 1,000, much more than 325, it did not seem to trigger review by this body. And even though it was near, but not on, the city-county boundary, even though it was in our sphere. But, so I was really confused about that from the beginning, like, why isn't this going to regional? But we didn't not pass it anyway, so you have to pass something before it would even come to regional, right?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, certainly.
The staff would be grateful for some clarification on this item in terms of if you ask us to move forward with going to the Planning Commission. We could certainly clear up some of the conversation that we're having today. we would appreciate that opportunity.
Could I be identified?
Certainly, go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. I think that I understand Ms. Knox saying, you know, if say a subdivision comes in, and it's not an elderly subdivision, but a subdivision with your typical mix of, residents, and you, under some formula, say it hits over the threshold number, that subdivision's a project of regional significance. But I think the same construction should be, on the one we just dealt with, is there's a golf course. I don't see any students there today. That's a project of regional significance. Or I understand Damani's going through an expansion down there, or,
Right.
Take whatever high school when they decide to expand. They're at 1,500, but they jump it up to, what would it be, 1,825? That's a project of regional significance. I think all three should be captured, which is a departure off of what we've done. But I also think there's a procedural mechanism. So, for example, when a large plan unit development comes in and say it does or does not trigger on some ways, but it has a school site, that school site has gone through the project of regional significance when it is ready to build, whether it's a special use permit or a building permit, because it was a project of regional significance when it came through on the plan unit development. I think in a similar way, if one of the jurisdictions has a plan, like in our downtown plan, we identify schools, possibly, those can then not have to go through the project of regional significance when any particular property goes through a decision, someone buys it for a school, it's already in total been decided to meet that project of regional significance for that allowed use. And this is a parallel to what I understand California does with compliance of specific plans to CEQA approval. So we could maybe look to that. I know there's an example, just kind of long-winded here, but then I'll stop, is I understand that they're looking to put an elementary school up on some City of Reno land in Northwest Reno. It's without a planned area, maybe it's zoned public facility, and schools are allowed public facility in addition to whatever use is there, but it's going to trip that trigger of 325 students, and I think that's appropriate. I think the elementary schools are getting pretty big, and if it's not within a plan unit development or some other planning area that's already looked at it on the macro level, then, it should be captured in our review. But if I may just continue on, one other thing is I think there needs to be some guidance that it needs to be captured as soon as possible with whatever hopefully the earliest stage of development possible, so we avoid the problem of what we had on this one, where utility quarter, is it about the plan or is it about the project? It is the project. It's the earliest level approval that needs to go forward, and it should be incumbent upon any project proponent to provide as much information to allow us to know at the first get out if it's a project regional significance or not, because by the time someone gets to building permit or even a special use permit, they've done so much work and engineering, and we don't really need to get in at that level, so we need to be able to have a bite at the apple very early. And maybe, if I just could expand, maybe the school district comes through with their facilities plan on an annual basis, and they have maps attached to that, and that's when we get it on their regular updates. And then we just deal with the charters and the privates on a more parcel base. These are all just some concepts that I have had kind of mulling in my mind and would like maybe for us to dwell on this a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ed Lawson.
So I think Naomi Dewar's right. This is something we have to look at. It does rise, especially in the case of the Wild Creek Golf Course, it's regional significance. It's affecting 3 different entities, the city of Sparks, city of Reno, and the unincorporated county. I don't know what the exact wording is, but that's why we pay Norm a lot of money every month. And I would just say that let's send it back to the Regional Planning Commission, and Norm has time to then craft the language.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Commissioner Bobzien. The light should come on. Grab the one next to you.
All right, we're borrowing Charlene's here. That'll work. I am sympathetic that a lot of the sites, well, and one site in particular, of course, is in play right now, certainly appears to be a project of regional significance and should necessitate some review as such. But I'm also trying to kind of play this out in terms of all of the different types of permutations that could come through. Certainly, Councilman Doerr's description of the situation that we had with the one charter school does come to mind. And so my first question is always, is there going to be parity between a private operation that, may put together a program for a school that is very different from how we see it in the publics, and that maybe it's a blended population, and we certainly have those where the grades stratification is kind of all over the map, and at the end of the day, you end up with a school that is similar in size to a high school, but maybe it's not called a high school. So how do we account for that? I'd have a hard time trying to say, okay, we're only going to cut this so that it's just high schools, but it's not elementary schools or middle schools. But then here comes an elementary school, which is also large. I think there also is a concern about the timing, as Councilwoman Breckus pointed out, and I want to pick up on something that she said, and this is kind of a question for staff, is where are we with facilities plans? I mean, as Trustee Frankel pointed out, there are a number of us here that are, very familiar with all of the construction activities that the district is going through, given our roles on, say, for instance, the Capital Fund and Protection Committee. So clearly, there's information there that could be compiled in a facilities report, but maybe the mechanism is for this board's consideration a regular review of that. Because that is at the front end rather than at the back end. So I'm just sort of in the spirit of brainstorming, just concerned that this is something that may seem simple, but if we send it down to regional planning and there's enough kind of ambiguity at our level as to what it is we're looking for, I don't want to send anybody on a wild goose chase when there may be simpler answers for regionals needs that we can pursue.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't disagree with any of the comments that have been made. I was more focused on middle and high schools. I have an elementary school within walking distance of my home, and I watched it be built. My kids attended it. The interesting thing is that the traffic patterns in the last, our son being 31 years old and he went to first grade there, but so in the last about 25 years, we'll say, have dramatically changed. Our kids walked to school. The whole neighborhood walked to school. They don't anymore. It is amazing. I don't see children walking by my house any longer, and it keeps my dog from barking, but it makes me a little sad because it was one of those things where as the group was walking down the street, the kids would join in, and it was this sort of large throng, and so things have changed, is my point. With that, I've also seen a huge increase of parent infractions. They fly down our street now. I mean, they fly. It's amazing. And if they're late, they really fly. So I think that's one of the major things, although I will tell you, when the school was first built, and I happened to be on the Citizens Advisory Board, I did have a complaint by one of the neighbors that the children were loud. Oh my goodness, right? I mean, and it's a happy sound for me. I can still hear them from my house. I hear the kids. It's a great sound. So that part is of no consequence. When you talk about middle schools and you talk about high schools, especially high schools, you have fields, you have stadiums many times, you have lighting at night, Even at Spanish Springs High School, when the band is practicing out in the field, I can hear them from my house, and I am across Pyramid Highway. It matters because it's up on the hill, and it's not an intrusion, but I can hear them. So the surrounding neighbors, I bet you can really hear them, the people who live up in the Hawko subdivisions. It's a huge impact of traffic having those two schools up there. And I mean it's arduous getting out of there or in there a couple of times a day. I think that's what's driving it. People expect, and I don't want to cloud this issue. The school has made my house more valuable. People love having schools in their neighborhoods. They love having churches in their neighborhoods. Schools and churches typically are the kinds of things that families moving into an area go, yeah, this is great, there's a school right there. So it has not been a detriment. But I think it's a scenario that we need to look at, because especially when you have a large school, and I hate to use this as the example, but it is in front of us, Wild Creek. It will dramatically impact the traffic flows and the traffic patterns, because it is a friction penalty when you have to move traffic across a major thoroughfare, a thoroughfare that's moving, my goodness, I don't know how many trips McCarran moves a day, but I'll bet you it's in the 50,000 range would be my base guess. Having had looked at La Posada in Sparks, and it was moving 10,000 trips a day, or close to 10,000 trips a day. So I might be light at 50,000. So it's when you have schools in those critical areas, those are the kinds of things that they become projects of regional significance, because they do affect multiple entities. So my question, one last question for Mr. Azevedo, explanation. So let's assume that we say, okay, high schools and middle schools are projects of regional significance. When they bring the project to the RPC, and the RPC, let's say, passes it, because it's passed there, but because it is also a project of regional significance, does it ever reach this board, or does it only reach this board on appeal?
Madam Chair, if it's affirmatively approved by the RPC as a project of regional significance, the only way it can get to this body is by an appeal, pursuant to your regulations.
Right. So we have to appeal, somebody has to appeal it up.
Has to bring it forward, yes, sir.
Anyways, right. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dewar.
Just a little more info. So trying to compile some of the comments that have been made. First of all, just say this. You mentioned schools and churches. Often, if the school and church is already there, the people moving in know that. It's much more acceptable than when schools and churches are coming in after the people live there. And I've had that experience in the county with a church coming in, where the residents are all up in arms. As much as they might like a church, they don't want a church right next to their house with the activity, that kind of thing. But getting back to the specifically the school, with the charter schools, one of the challenges is, and you were starting to hit on this, is that, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong here, but my knowledge is that they are not part of the bus system. And the charter schools, whether public or private, the parents are either driving or they're walking, and it's mostly driving because they are usually pulling from a large area. And so that means, for the example, the charter school that was going to be in South Reno, they were going to be pulling from north of I-80, all the way down into Washoe Valley, people all having to drive there twice a day, because there's no way kids could walk, there's no bus system, and so that's where it was going to really impact the traffic. On the second problem there is that I don't think the charter schools are on the capital plan, because they're not part of the the school board's capital plan. So even if we look at the capital plan, we're not going to see these schools. And so the two things I think that would even just add some clarity is to keep the legislative number of 325, which means that we're kind of agnostic about whether it's a high school, middle school, or elementary school. We're just saying at a threshold of 325, whether it's a new 325 or an addition, and look at it as a project versus a planning unit, so that if there is a project, like a charter school, like a Wild Creek, like a project, that trips this 325 student threshold, that project is going to need to get some review. My then second issue is needing enough detail. I am very sympathetic, and I'm trying to struggle with a way on PUDs to get those to come in and get sort of a first screening so that, for example, I'll just use a recent case we had, which was Daybreak. They know you are in a difficult territory, and you're going to have to take some extraordinary measures to deal with that kind of place. So you don't spend all this time and money, you know? Well, it's the same thing with a school. They're spending a lot of money and time to put this school together. And the question is, at what point should we be looking at it? I thought Mr. Bobbs, you made a good point about looking at the CIP, and several other people have mentioned that, but it's just that they're not all on the CIP. The CIP changes all the time as needs change. Or was that, did I mischaracterize that? I thought you were recommending that's at least one good time to look at it.
Yeah, no, not a CIP, the actual formulation and regular submission of a facilities plan. And quite frankly,
Yeah.
you know, there may be some avenue there for also including the district
Yeah.
publics. I mean, there is a relationship with the charters. You know, there are some statutory things we could look at perhaps to make sure that we're getting everybody. And I'm not saying that that's my preferred
Yeah.
avenue on this. I guess my concern is, and you're right, it'd be good to get that early review, but the flip side of that is you're not going to get an early review until something's been developed. And so
Exact- it's a
where
chicken
does
egg
this fit
thing.
into the
Exactly. So I
timeline
would,
of getting schools built and making sure that we are able to build schools? That
Yeah.
is, I'm looking at this from that perspective, that we are not unwittingly, unnecessarily burdening a
Yeah.
larger activity of making sure that we're providing schools for our kids, because we have one episode, or frankly, a couple of them recently, that, you know, this strikes me as we're fighting the last battle, and we may unwittingly create problems for ourselves in the future. I'm at a little bit of a loss up here, having this discussion, sort of not hearing from the school district, because I got to think that they are going to contemplate this possibility, this prospect, and be able to bring forth some other perspectives that maybe none of us have thought of coming from our regional governing board.
well, and
perspective.
you're
So-
hitting something that I've been concerned about. So enough detail for somebody, whether it's the Regional Planning Commission, because I think that's where this is contemplated to take place. And again, it only comes to us if someone appeals it. So it just brings those experts together to review, needing enough detail so you could do a good review. And that is an excellent point for the school board staff to come and have that conversation with the Regional Planning Commission about what are the pros and cons of this. We don't want to unnecessarily hold things up, but I want to say this is all coming to the fore because we did not have WC1, we did not have money to build schools, we weren't building schools for a long time, and now we are. And so, you know, it comes to, I'm chair of the Debt Management Commission, it's coming to us, you had served on that, Veronica, it's coming to us for the bonds, and then here comes the school, and now what do we do? So, anyway.
Thank you. Commissioner Abbott.
Does universities and colleges trigger anything on here? You know, I was assuming employment's below all those, I guess, on A's, you know, 1 through 7. Assuming it didn't trigger any of those, I think of like Edison campus, or even Dandini. It's, you know, does that trigger or?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Certainly, Mr. Acevedo.
2 points. Currently, under your existing guidelines and statutes, no. Okay, the universities aren't contemplated. And I did misspeak earlier, I want to clarify. The 325 student population threshold is in the guideline, not state statute, just so I'm clear on that. I did misspeak. And there's one more point, if I could clarify it. This whole discussion on the detail, so everybody understands, will occur before the RPC. They will make a decision to amend their guidelines, hopefully with guidance from this body, and then it'll come back to this body as an informational item, not for an approval.
Oh,
So I just throw that out.
I did not realize that. I thought we had to, like, change these guidelines.
No, it's actually at the RPC level. That's the way the legislature set it up.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Just one quick item. Sorry about that. Just one quick item. If this board would desire to also be part of a conversation with the Planning Commission, certainly we could arrange for that to happen. You still would not take action at that time, but you would be able to be part of that conversation, so that's on the table.
I think that makes sense.
Commissioner Bybee?
I guess in looking at this, I guess my question would be, if we supported schools being projects of regional significance. How does that impact, or does it impact the schools and the school district negatively, or have an impact? What is the impact on the school district, and what is the impact on the developments that would be coming in that would add the amount of population to trigger the regional, or if we just made them all regional significance, how does it impact both developers and the school district itself? And does it hamstring anyone? Does it put any more limitations, any time constraints on it? I'm really unclear on if we, if this changes, how does that change for the school district and for our developers?
Madam ED?
Madam Chair, thank you. So part of the conversation would be to ascertain answers to some of those questions. If this board today said to the Regional Planning Commission, we're interested in you taking a look at potentially having schools, and we've had a lot of conversation today, but having schools become projects of regional significance, or certain schools, types of schools becoming projects of regional significance, I'm confident that the Planning Commission is going to say, well, we'd like to understand some of the outcomes of what that would look like. And that is the time that your staff would then be able to do some research and review on those things to bring that information back.
Good. Yes, Veronica, Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Ms. Frankel. And I'll be brief, I promise. I think that this, I think this is really about mitigating impact for multiple jurisdictions. That's really what it comes down to. Because, you know, the example here is when a school is built, it's built in a single jurisdiction, even though, but it has impacts to multiple jurisdictions. That's what this conversation is about, is the impact to multiple jurisdictions. And especially when they're placed in key positions, which they are, and for understandable reasons. But when it impacts multiple jurisdictions, that's when it becomes incumbent upon us to take up that conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I agree. Ms. Frankel.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, Madam Chair. I think this conversation has been extremely important, and I appreciated the thoughtfulness, and I think there's room for more conversation. I think we're here today having this conversation, as Commissioner Dora mentioned, because of the wonderful opportunity we have now that we haven't had for quite some time to build schools. So let's just acknowledge that. The other thing that I appreciate Commissioner Bobzian's comment is we want to make sure that, and I want to make sure that our staff that know more about the impacts of these kinds of processes on our schools be a part of this conversation as well, and they're not here today. So I'm hopeful that they can be part of any conversations down the road at the Regional Planning Commission or a joint meeting of both bodies. But the other thing I would mention is that in looking at these guidelines as they currently are, I don't see reference to specific projects by type of project. I see criteria of projects, and I think I would encourage just a sort of a cautious lens in looking at those kinds of saying all schools or all anything. Right. I think that what really needs to be examined is what are the criteria, and do those need to shift to be able to accommodate the situation that we've been facing with respect to Wild Creek. And as has been mentioned, I think we're having this conversation because of one specific issue, and it's opened up the possibility that we need to explore this. So I think modifying the guidelines for project of regional significance may be one solution to that challenge that this has all raised, and there may be others. And so I'm just encouraging, rather than driving forward to making changes to this as the only solution to this complex issue and the challenge that Wild Creek presented and the conversation that I think appropriately ensued, I think there may be other avenues, and there's opportunity for greater conversation about what's appropriate, be it presentation of a facilities plan by the school district to this body or the commission, or modifying these. Those are options. And so I'm always a fan of looking at what's the problem we're trying to solve. Are we driving toward a solution too quickly? So, and are we setting a precedent by doing this around just schools or just naming schools that could create problems around analyses of project of regional significance for other types of projects in the future?
Thank you very much. I think those are very valid points, and this has been a great conversation and extremely helpful to me. So I appreciate everybody's aspects on it. The one thing I would say that I think as we look at this, I do think something needs to be done, but we want to make sure we don't make it more complicated to build a school. And so, I mean, that's the bottom line. When we need schools, whether we like to put it in a specific neighborhood or a dual neighborhood, whatever we have to do, but we have to have schools if we're going to continue this kind of growth which I think is being thrust upon us. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make it clear, I don't believe that this is a knee-jerk reaction.
No,
I think that this, I think
agree.
that this is a learned reaction because I mean, I can take you to multiple schools in the area. Try to get in and out of Reno High. And I'll
Trust me,
rest
I
my
do that on a
case.
routine basis.
I know Madam Chair does, so my point precisely. So this is something that we've learned over time, and how do we effectively mitigate the impact in the future? And look, we're tasked with not just schools, but with virtually everything. Everything that we're doing now. It doesn't matter whether it's a housing development, whether it's neighborhood commercial, or whether it's some type of industrial or commercial. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Commissioner Dewar.
Yeah, so I did come at this with a school overlay, but there is another problem we're really having in South Reno, and it's again about a facility. In this case, excuse me, in this case, the state is planning to build a brand-new DMV in the middle of a very rapidly growing industrial area that doesn't have good access from major arterials. It's not near a freeway or byway, it's within. There's no traffic issue, analysis. There was nothing came even in front of the city, and nor is it expected to. It's just being plopped in. The state owns some land, and they're going to put a DMV there. And every single person in Washoe County virtually is going to be going to that one place in South Reno. And there's about 3 ways to get there, but they all involve quite a bit of driving. And so that is something I've been struggling about too. I cheered that we'd have a new DMV, that would have bigger parking, that people could actually park at the DMV to get their license and their license plate. No, it's in my ward, and it's right off R, and we've had numerous accidents already on this road with Sand Hill and DMR and deaths. And so I'm sitting here, and we have absolutely, forget regional planning, we have no say even at the city of Reno, to my knowledge. And so when you brought up, I thought that was a great point about, there's the Redfield campus and Dandini and all of that. The state can't just plop stuff places, and just think that's just great.
Yeah, they
So,
can.
well, they do,
Whether we like it or not.
but I did want to broaden the conversation, add a little bit of risk to a larger issue that we're facing as well for regional giant facilities that are affecting neighborhoods. So I would like to keep it on the schools for a moment. Let's peel one potato at a time. My proposal would be to make a motion to send this to Regional Planning Commission for discussion, deliberation. It talks about projects of regional significance, but then the criteria are more about regional planning. So I wouldn't mind a project focus. So maybe a project that happens to be a school of 325 might be a starting point for them to deliberate. And maybe they say, reject that notion and come up with something entirely different. I like the idea of having a joint meeting where they could hear some of our concerns. Our planning commission at Reno, as good as they are, aren't always hand in glove with the city council. It takes some conversation and dialogue with them to get us all linked up. So I wouldn't want to just send this to the Regional Planning Commission and say, go do it, and plus you can adopt it, and it never even has to come back to us. That really concerns me. So anyway, so I would be in favor of initiating the process to have a conversation at Regional Planning Commission, but before anything's adopted, to make sure that the ideas come back to this board in a joint meeting before they would ever consider adopting something. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I thought we were going to dance.
Sorry, the chair forgot to turn her phone off. All right, Commissioner Lawson.
So what I'm concerned about is giving the voice to the people that are affected, and I'm going to stay with Wild Creek. After the utility line movement, you guys got no say-so at this point, Reno or Washoe County.
Right.
It's all on Sparks.
Right.
So, but it affects your citizens.
Right.
Your kids are going to cross
highway.
395.
Yeah.
Those kids from Sun Valley are going to cross down into that area. So to me, this is about it's a regional significant because it affects multiple entities.
I agree.
And those citizens should have a say-so in what happens in their backyard. Even though it crosses some imaginary line, it still affects their lives. So you don't know when you cross into Reno and Sparks many times. You know, that line is a fluid line.
So are you proposing a concept where if it's within a mile of jurisdictional boundary, something like that, where at least two, is that where you're going with this?
You know, I don't know what the exact words are, and that's why I'd really like to see Norm, but the intent is to give everybody a voice. You know, if we're going to put a high school in my backyard, and it just happens to be over that imaginary line that I don't get a say-so in it, but it's literally in my backyard.
Yeah.
I should have a say-so in it. And that's what I'm after in this whole thing. And I think Norm can help with that, and I think the Regional Planning Commission can do that also. It's not about schools in particular. A DMV would be a huge thing too. Let's just put a DMV at Wild Creek Golf Course. That changes the entire traffic
Well,
pattern.
at least you have
around
a
there,
bigger
too.
road there, you know?
The state doesn't own it, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I understand, but you know what I'm saying? It's its own public facility. So I'm thinking just on the big level here is if it affects you, you should have a voice in it.
Commissioner
If I
Breckus.
could, yeah, I mean, I think in 2016, when Washoe County question 1 passed, if we, the school district, had said, okay, time for you to go bring your facilities plan forward, and they said, well, we've got a CIP of 10 in the next, 10 years, here they are all on the maps, and we would have said, okay, we're going to look at all in a big suite, we're going to have public meetings on them, we're going to debate them at this point, think about them, and then the conformance review for that facilities plan would have involved everyone and looked at it at that level, and that's commensurate, I think, with what we do as regional, big regional rollout. And then say, Innovations High School comes down on 2nd Street or Doral Academy. They're not part of the bigger system, so, when they're going for special use permit or zoning change, that's when they get captured by the regional planning framework. I think that's a good approach. I think on the state facilities, I think there is precedent for that in the federal government. I think it was Bill Clinton who passed an executive order during the boom of federal court building that said that federal courts need to enhance the cities in which they're located and encourage them as federal policy to move downtown and coordinate with, revitalization efforts, because all the judges around the country wanted the federal courts to move up in the suburbs where they were living. And that executive order was the policy of the federal government. And I think maybe there can be communications with the states, because we all know that those queue up to state legislative process and appropriation. So I think that's let's not open our statute for that, but let's think about if there's other ways to get into that. But let's deal with the school issue first.
Thank you, Jenny. Commissioner Hartung.
Well, I don't think our intent is to hobble the school district or any entity for that matter. I don't think that's the intent. I think the ultimate intent here is when, and Commissioner Lawson is on the mark here. Only one entity gets a bite at these things to say, look, this is how it's affecting us. That's my biggest concern. And I think what will ultimately happen, even though there's going to be the perception that this is hobbling the system, I think what's going to happen is we're going to start planning more thoughtfully, and these pieces of infrastructure will be easier for people to utilize, and it won't be this nightmare of trying to get in and out and timing everything just perfectly. I think it'll ultimately create a much better plan when you have multiple agencies looking at it, and this is the proper place to do that. When you have, this is just my opinion, when you have a high school or a middle school, they typically affect multiple jurisdictions. Elementary schools, not always. Occasionally they do. In Spanish Springs, we've got a couple that they cross the line, but it's not to the degree where it could potentially bring the community to a standstill, unlike, and again, I keep going back to Spanish Springs High School and Shaw Middle School. It brings Eagle Canyon to a standstill. And by the way, that is not helpful for the Washoe County School District to stay on time. And what we've seen with the Washoe County School District is the bus drivers have violated the policy of staying on Eagle Canyon, and they'll use the side streets as thoroughfares, as workarounds, and it's created this traffic nightmare in the neighborhoods because they have a time schedule to stay on with the kids also. It's not their fault. I mean, I get
Well,
the
do you like
need
this
for workaround.
325 cutoff? I mean, or do you just want to pick high school and middle school, or where?
I think it's more appropriate to pick high school and middle school because we already know that they're the two that are going to affect multiple jurisdictions. I don't think that there's very many middle schools that only affect one jurisdiction.
Okay,
And I think high schools are
thank you.
multiples.
I think
Just to
we've
wrap this up.
beat this issue pretty heavily. So let's get a motion that kind of gives some guidance
Good.
to.
So I would make a motion to refer this issue.
Before you do that,
Oh,
could I ask public comment? We have
Yes,
public comment.
absolutely.
Yeah, we have 3 for this item. We have Wesley Griffin, and after that will be Ty Crawford.
Mr. Griffin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We're here trying to,
I don't think your mic is on.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm with Save Wild Creek. The Save Wild Creek group is very much concerned about schools in our area. We do believe that we need more schools, better schools, and we're 100% for a new high school, even in our area. We really do feel that if there had been, if this type of project would have required to be considered a plan of regional significance, we probably wouldn't be here where we are today. But this whole project was brought about under the radar. People right here that were on the RSCVA board didn't know this was coming down until last May. We came down here and everybody heard about it. When we went to the RSCVA meeting, we said, gosh, here we're talking about a pretty big project here. Have we looked at Plan B? Plan B? What's Plan B? We don't need a Plan B. We have that kind of money being spent. Our tax dollars being spent with no Plan B. So then suddenly, we have a Plan B. And the Plan B is really not a Plan B. I might characterize it as a Plan CYA. Because this was done after the fact. And if you look at the people that were on the due diligence committee, it was people that had a financial interest in a new school going there, or at least they had a financial interest with the Washoe County School Board. Are they going to say anything about what the board's telling them? And the other people were employees of the Washoe County School District. Is this how we do things? We come up with these plans, these left field plans, and then we justify them in retrospect? I mean, this makes a mockery of this agency. We need to know about these things beforehand. We're all for schools. Why do we need to destroy a very valuable asset to our community, a golf course, which, by the way, since it is now under private management, is doing extremely well. We've seen a huge improvement in the play there. It's going to make money. So now we're going to come in and tear down something that is a big asset to our community, which never should have been done to begin with. And if we had had you folks involved in the regional planning at an earlier time, could have saved us all a lot of headache. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ty Crawford?
And then after that will be Kim Tracy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ty Crawford. I'm new to the area. Nice to see all your faces. I just want to say, from what I understand from what you guys are talking about, it sounds like you're kind of on our side. I don't know if everybody is, but I know Ed and so like this gentleman over here. And we've got a nice facility out there, and I was just wondering, is like, how do you take a facility that is a business that's making money and close it down to put a school there? I mean, to me, it would seem like that a good business person would keep this up and running, keep it going, and, to move the school somewhere else to open up another entity, to keep that generated. What else do I have? It's a beautiful area. I heard him talking about, what's the dollar amount that this is going to come to? It's just like who's ever involved with this is just, whatever the price is going to be, it's like they're going to say yes to it no matter what. I don't know, does Washoe County know that these people are just throwing their money away to whatever they want to happen? It's a beautiful site. There's a lot of homes up there that have great views, and nobody wants to look down at these stadium lights all night long to hear the noise that you're talking about. Anyway, I've got tons to say, but I want to wrap it up. And, when I get more confidence and I get better at speaking, that I'd be glad to come down and say a bunch more. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next is Kim
Tracy.
Tracy. So pretty.
Good afternoon, I'm Kim Tracy. First, I'd like to say that the way that you guys feel about the state coming down in and plopping down a new DMV is kind of how we feel about the county coming in and plopping down a school in our backyard, and feeling like we don't have any control over it. So what I'd like to say is I would implore you to employ the most strictest guidelines for putting in new schools. And I agree with Commissioner Hartung. I mean, I think that what needs to be done is it needs to be done early on. So the planning commission, the whole thing needs to be done from a broader scope. And in the beginning, so that, what happens is it comes in and it's piecemeal. I think we all understand that the reason that the school chose this site, it was going to be from one entity to another without much problem of passing the school property or putting the school there, the school district taking the property from RSCVA, and it was going to be an interagency transfer, wasn't going to be a big deal. I don't think that other sites were looked at adequately. I know that some of you feel like possibly the school is going to be hamstrung from building a school and getting a new site, and we should listen to them and hear what they have to say, and that's fine. But I think that they're going to come in, they're going to tell you, yes, this is going to make it much more difficult for us to build a school if you guys have a say-so in advance. I don't believe that's true. I think what it's going to do is it's going to make them try harder, focus more, and be better at doing their due diligence, at looking at multiple sites before the fact, not after the fact, which is done this time around. I don't know if it's too late to save Wild Creek Golf Course. I mean, it certainly seems like it is. I think that you people are our last hope, and I'm keeping you in my prayers at night that you do something to protect the golf course. I just came from there, as a matter of fact, before we came here, and it's full. The people are golfing. There's all kinds of people golfing today because it's going to be in the 50s. I mean, I think they're nuts, but they're out there golfing. There was a coyote running across the golf course. Egrets, birds, it's a beautiful place. And one thing that Nevada is not short on is wide open spaces and places to build schools and put bigger entities like this. And I think as Mr. Griffin mentioned, it's turning a profit now. It's actually being run by a golf agency. They know how to run the business. They've made some improvements. And with that, and with doing very little, it's actually turning a profit now, according to Duncan Golf. So I think it's something to reconsider. I think that you should all look at it. I think that I believe it's still not too late to even move the school altogether. I think that the fact that you're moving the power lines or looking at having to move the power lines is just the first in a number of things that's going to come up, and the traffic is going to be horrific. It's bottlenecked already, so I think everybody in Spanish Springs is going to feel the hit if you put in the school.
Thank you very much. Any more public comment?
I have none.
Okay, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board, and now I will take that motion.
All right, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to refer to the Planning Commission a charge to evaluate a change of criteria or added clarity for evaluating certain schools or all schools as projects of regional significance, and prior to coming to final conclusions, to reconvene with this board before moving forward to adopt any changes.
Okay. I have a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. We've done public comment. Do we have any discussion?
Yours working now?
Mr. Bobzian, Commissioner Bobzian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to oppose this motion more just on the procedural aspect of it. In my mind, the role of the governing board in this motion would properly be to send this down to the Planning Commission. I don't think we need to have a joint meeting with them. I don't want to get into their kitchen. I want them to be able to deliberate on this and bring back whatever they feel needs to be done, and then it's done. So I understand the motion maker's interest in having a say in it, but I think what we're doing is we're starting the ball rolling, and it's more of it's a procedural matter that they should look at. We're asking them to look at, and then we're done with it. That's the sort of motion that I could support, but us being somehow barnacled into their process is not something that I'm going to support.
Thank you, Commissioner Bobzian. Commissioner Lasso?
So I understood it that they would craft the language and then it would come back here for review, that we wouldn't be involved in their process. Is that correct?
Well, I was open to hearing what everyone had to say, and that it could either come back here and for our input before they adopted it, or we could do it as a joint meeting, either way, however that works. I just wanted to be able to formally participate in that because these are the criteria for projects of regional significance, and they're a pretty darn big deal. And, if we're going to change the landscape, I thought as the governing board, we should have some input, unless, another way to do it is we all go make public comment, but that didn't seem quite appropriate.
Okay, so I would support it, and the way I understood it was that they would do the crafting of the language, and then it would come back here for review at this board, not that we would be part of the commission's process.
Okay.
Right, but they have to adopt according to Mr. Azevedo.
Correct.
So we would have some input into where they're going, and we could send that input back to them before they adopt.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what I had taken.
Yeah.
I took Madam Chair, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
But that's what I felt Mr. Lawson,
Yeah.
the same way as Mr. Lawson. I thought he was on track. I thought it was clear
Yeah.
that we weren't going to be involved in the process. We were sending it down to them with our ideas, and I think you left enough wiggle room for them to sort of figure it out, and then
Right.
and then once they had a bite at it, that it would come back to us, and we would perhaps tie up any loose laces.
Okay. Does the seconder agree with that, Commissioner Bybee?
That's the way I understood it. So if that's
Okay.
not
Yeah.
what Naomi.
No, that is
It's
exact.
not
but
your intent, then we'll
we
go
don't
ahead.
get to adopt. They
Okay.
adopt. But I do want some understanding where they're going before they adopt.
Yeah.
So.
I'd like,
Commissioner Bybee?
can I get a point of clarification from our attorney as far as if we're requesting, with our thoughts that we have on this today, to the Regional Planning Commission, they craft whatever language they're going to on possible changes. If that comes back to us, is it merely for informational? Because my understanding, unless I'm incorrect, is that it's not in our authority to approve that. It's still the Regional Planning Commission's authority to approve any changes, but we're asking that they bring it back so we can see it. But will we have an ability to approve or not approve, or no?
Madam Chair, if I may, as I understand the motion in the second, the desire is to have the RPC go through its process, take public comment, come with a revised guideline purportedly, and that revised guideline before final adoption at the RPC level would come to this body. This body could review it, make comments. This body does not adopt.
Right.
And then
That's what I wanted.
the RPC would go back to the RPC, and the RPC would adopt whatever they determine appropriate at that time.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's what I thought it was. Thank you.
That was my
Okay.
understanding.
Yeah, and
Commissioner
that's
Bobzian.
what I intended.
Okay, so the process for that, so I'm clear, is not a joint meeting where we
No,
sit around a table.
that was
It's merely
proposed by
it comes
our-
back to us, then it goes back down to them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
One more question, sorry.
Commissioner Abbott.
So we're sending this back down to planning, but they don't have to make any changes, and they can make 20 more changes.
Yep.
Right? That's my understanding?
Yeah, we,
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Just checking. Okay, thanks.
and it would depend on how it's agendized, I imagine. You know, how broadly or narrowly you agendize that item.
Okay. All right. We've done public comment. We have a motion and a second. Somebody else?
I think
Additional comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jenny. Opposed? Yes. Commissioner Bobzian.
And maybe this is for a future conversation, but I don't want to
That
lose
was hard.
track of the thread that Commissioner Breckus, Councilman Breckus brought up earlier, and that is this notion of
It was unanimous.
possible requirement for the district to present us with a facilities plan.
Yeah.
I know there's some history to that. You know, we went through the downturn where we weren't building any schools, and now we're back to building schools, and it may be that this is the sort of policy that may not, if adopted, have impact until, you know, the next round of economic vitality. But we should probably track that one down too, because I think, as I hear the concerns that have been elevated to various members of this governing board that sort of grounded this discussion today, I don't think all of those problems are solved by what may come or may not come in terms of the projects for regional significance criteria. I think a lot of this is the desire to have sort of a front-end bite of the apple on these planning issues is frankly going to be better served by that facilities plan rather than, you know, setting up yet another appeals process that people can, on the back end, if they don't like a project, they bump it up to regional governing board.
Okay. All right, we're done with C. Let's move on to D. This should be fast.
Madam Chair, item 7D for possible action. Consideration and possible action to form the Regional Planning Governing Board Legislative Subcommittee for the 2019 legislative session. This is on pages 89 and 90 of your staff report. Historically, the Regional Planning Governing Board has put together a legislative subcommittee made up of the current chair, the current vice chair, and the immediate past chair, thereby ensuring that there is one member from each jurisdiction on the subcommittee. And this subcommittee has meetings set weekly throughout the legislative session. And what that allows staff to be able to do is bring items of interest or concern to that legislative subcommittee. The committee is then allowed to provide direction and direct staff to do items as necessary at the state legislature. So the recommendation today is for direction from this board to create the legislative subcommittee for the 2019 session.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair.
Bobzing.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Lawson.
I'm just going to make the motion that we,
Motion.
Accept the chair, the vice chair, and the immediate past chair.
Second.
As the legislative committee.
Do we have any public comment?
I have none for this item.
Okay. We have a motion to accept staff report. Commissioner Bybee.
The other section that we're addressing on here are alternates, so I would agree with the motion on the 3 positions, and I would be interested in serving as an alternate if the commission so desires. Thank you.
That would be
Past chairman.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Do we need an alternate from each entity?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So do we want to do it all in one motion?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, so,
Well, let's just go in line then. Chair, vice chair, immediate past, and then pass.
okay. Is that
They
acceptable?
still live here, right?
Yeah, if they still live
Yeah,
here.
if they happen to be alive.
And they're still on this commission. Okay.
Madam Chair, I believe they are.
So Jenny, I think I heard your name just now.
As an alternate?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that's the motion. Who seconded it?
One more.
Oh, county would be Commissioner Hartung.
That's correct.
Hartung.
Because he's the immediate past.
Pass.
Hoo-yah.
Okay,
You got
Now.
everybody?
so that's our motion.
That's
And
the
we have
motion.
Who was the seconder?
I was.
Oh, you were, okay. We have a motion and a second. If there's no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jenny. Opposed? You can't oppose.
This is my post-vote comment, so I'll wait. Sorry for
Okay.
jumping on the gavel there.
A motion carries. All right. Commissioner Bob Zane.
I was just going to say, here's to a very light workload for this committee
Oh,
for
yeah.
the
Would
coming
that be
session. Can we
nice?
try that for once, please, everybody?
Would that be nice? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Madam Executive Director.
Item 7E for possible action, direction and possible action regarding the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update. What we have for you today is a short update that provides the results from your joint Planning Commission Governing Board meeting and also provides you with the results from our community conversation that was hosted on December 5th. We have Lauren Knox to present that.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. For the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. Again, it's going to be a quick update just on the joint meeting outcomes and the community conversation. So as you may remember, we hosted a joint meeting on November 29th with the Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Governing Board. You heard a presentation by staff and the consultant team, and then we also had kind of a host of activities. So one of those exercises was really including writing likes and dislikes on each of the 4 scenarios. And then I'm going to provide you a highlight of some of those comments made with each scenario. It's not every comment that was made, but it's just to give you really a flavor of what was said. So in terms of the classic scenario, the like included the cost of housing, and the dislike included things like too much sprawl, it's unsustainable, and that there was not enough in terms of housing choices. For the McCarran scenario, members liked the choice of housing, continued use of prior policy directives, and multimodal potential. For dislikes, we had land consumption, increased density where there's limited infrastructure, and an increase to the Washoe County School District. In terms of Smart Greenfield, the likes included low land consumption, less development where there's not infrastructure, and that it is manageable. In terms of dislikes, were that the RTC will reach the perimeter and cause increased costs and fees, and it's sprawl-oriented. And finally, for infill, members like comments included less land consumption that can be reserved for recreation and habitat lands. It promotes a pedestrian environment, and there is a better housing mix. In terms of dislikes, it included concerns for public safety in outlying areas. Raising the existing areas was not realistic, and the impact on shed of wastewater treatment. As you may remember, we also asked the RPC and RPGB members to place dots on the evaluation criteria that they felt was most important. On the slide, you can see the results, but generally, most members felt that sewage load was most important, followed by air quality and land utilization and infill development. So we also held a community conversation on December 5th where staff gave a presentation to the public and asked the public to weigh in on the scenarios and reaffirm some previous survey results. That event was held at the Discovery Museum, and we had around 45 to 50 participants and a lot of engagement. It was pretty great. The activities were a little bit different than what was at the joint meeting, but still pretty comparable in some aspects. For the community conversation, we didn't ask the members of the public to go through and do the same like and dislike activity. However, we did ask them to place dots on the scenario that they felt they liked the most. So as you can see, it's kind of comparable. The public really liked the infill scenario the most, followed by Smart Greenfield. And we kind of took that comparison in terms of the number of likes we received by the RPC and RPGB members, which again, infill and followed by Smart Greenfield. In terms of the evaluation criteria importance, members of the public felt that land utilization and affordable housing were of the most importance. And you can see some similarities between the joint meeting and the community conversation participants on the graphs on the slide, especially in the case of sewage load and infill development. So then at the community conversation, we also asked members of the public to review the results of the previous survey we had regarding growth and reaffirm whether or not the standings still remain. As you can see on the slide here, the gray bars show the previous survey results, and then the red dots are from the participants at the community conversation. And as you can see, in terms of infrastructure and natural environment, those still popped as the top 2 results. The third one, however, shifted a bit, and that would be regional coordination as opposed to accommodating growth. So that was kind of an interesting thing that we found.
Can you hold that slide right there, Lauren?
Mhm.
I think it's interesting to point out, look at economy and jobs. If you would have gone back to 2007 or 8, that would have been overflowing. And it's because we have a robust economy right now. So it's interesting how people have changed their concerns when the needs are met. I believe Maslow talked about this, but I won't go there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a quick comment too, it is fascinating, this chart on page 5, where they're combined, to see the disconnect. I mean, there's a disconnect on affordable housing where the public thought it was much more important than we did apparently, where we thought air quality was much more important because we maybe know more about the limitations it puts on growth, where land utilization, although I'm not sure what's in that basket, and also smart greenfield composite, I mean, the public was leaning there much more than apparently we were. So I think this is kind of fascinating that we have this, very few of these match up. Let me put it that way. And most of them are a little bit different, or quite a bit different. So I don't know what your takeaway, there's only 10 of us, there were 45 of them. You know, I don't know what it all means, but I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to it. We did apparently agree on infill development pretty well, housing mix, and that's about it.
I think, if I recall, I remember Mr. Bob Dean saying something along the lines of how we prioritize what were regional in nature. Obviously, air quality is regional in nature, whereas, and a focus of regional bodies and governance, but whereas affordable housing is maybe more at the jurisdiction level and not so much in the wheelhouse of the regional planning agency, I thought.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Bobzien.
Yeah, and that was partly my point. I think it was also, and this frankly threads back to the comments that Commissioner Hartung brought up, was just sort of the temporal nature of all of this, that, you know, priorities change. And so in my mind, when I made that comment about air quality recently, it's like, you know, I identified that because I see that as a hard stop limitation that if we don't deal with, it's a binary condition. It's either yes or no. Whereas, yes, there are strategies that this agency, this governing board are, you know, pursuing to address housing affordability, of course, at the regional level, and yet we sort of know that just cyclically things are going to, over the planning horizon for the regional plan, or those conditions are going to change and fluctuate a lot more so than the air quality, which is just, you know, just different bucket altogether. So, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Vibing.
I think looking at this chart, what I see in it is that we need to, again, be looking at the public. And what is the public's input? What are their priorities? And the public from this chart, air quality, maybe all of us looking at it regionally, looking at it from other commissions and boards we sit on, look at it as a real problem. But what does the average citizen living in the Truckee Meadows, what is most important to them? So it's critically important, and I would agree. Look at how far off we are, how different what our priorities are compared to the public's. And the housing would be a prime example because the affordable housing is hitting them in the pocketbook right now, trying to find a place to live or not lose the place that they're living in. And so I think as we look at planning, I think looking at this is really important because we can't lose sight as elected officials that we do have more information. We've got experts coming in and giving us a lot of information, but we always have to, we are elected to represent our residents, and we absolutely have to think top priority of what their concerns are and not forget those as we're making decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung.
My question would be, just think about this for a moment, would air quality and how people think about it change if this poll were taken at a different time of year when we don't have inversions and people aren't burning wood stoves as they do in the wintertime? Because our air quality in the summertime is actually very different than it is in the wintertime. It can be horrendous. But we rarely hit warnings in the summertime. In fact, I don't ever remember hitting a warning in the summertime.
Well, this recent fire.
From fires?
Yeah.
Okay, and I will stand corrected, yes, and thank you for that. From a natural disaster, but those are things that are out of our control, and it really doesn't matter how well we plan when there's a 700 or 800,000 acre fire over the hill and it's all blowing this direction. We're just being affected by proximity.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. I think the point that I'd also make is I question the support for infill, because I think we need to define what infill is. So I think the city of Reno was defining the Daybreak project as an infill project, and yet that was aggressively opposed. And why was it aggressively opposed? Because people use that space as open space, then they want to keep it as open space. The biggest complaint I get is from across the board, from everybody, is we want to keep our open space. We don't want people to build in the park on Mayberry Drive. Well, as it happens, that's deed restricted, they can't. But regardless, if it weren't deed restricted, that would be a place to put infill. But the people who live in my district don't want infill there. And so I think that's a factor that changes depending on what the topic is and what the group is that's there too. So I think there's a lot that we can gather from this, but we've got to look at it from a broad-based picture also. And now that we've interrupted you, go ahead.
No, there's definitely a lot of really interesting things to see here, and this is really kind of that first cut from the public in terms of these items. We'll be bringing back a lot more. We're going to do a lot more work on this, but there's some interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
So we also asked about the trade-offs piece that were previously presented, and generally the results aligned with what was said before in terms of trade-offs. So in terms of spending public dollars, a majority of people still felt that we should maintain or improve existing services and facilities in developed areas, that we should grow up instead of growing out, more public transit over roads, though this one was the most split. It was most split in our first survey, it was most split here, so that's pretty interesting. And housing with less land and more access to service and amenities. So we have developed a survey on scenarios, and we premiered this at the community conversation, and we are currently working to really push this out to as many avenues as possible, so this will be another kind of input for that public piece. The survey is available at the plantruckeemeadows.org website. And then in terms of next steps, again, we're going to be pushing out that scenario survey. We're going to be using all of the feedback to help us create a preferred alternative and then a plan map. This will obviously come back to this board for approval. We're working to draft the plan map and policies, and we're hoping to host another joint meeting with the Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Planning Governing Board in January to discuss this. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Commissioners, Commissioner Hartung. Okay, when it gets to the point where I'm losing my voice again, it's time to end this meeting. So let's move it along here.
Okay.
Commissioner Hartung.
Motion to adjourn. I find it interesting that people talk about more transit over roads, and yet at RTC, our ridership is down, and it's down hard right now.
Interesting.
And so it's yet they call for more transit, but ridership is down. So what that tells me, though, and there's a very interesting correlation for me here at least, and that is that we don't have routes in places that serve people. I think that's the key. We're placing routes as a matter of convenience and not where and when they serve people, and which comes, and I won't go deeply into RTC, but it comes to how do we deal with commuter traffic in the morning, and then how do we deal with let's say, a more aged population midday or a school population midday where it's trying to get someplace else to doctor's appointments or something of that nature. So that's an interesting slide for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Do we have any public comment on this issue?
I have none for this item.
Okay, we have no public comment. And I guess we're looking for a motion just to approve the report, accept the report?
You do not need to make a motion to accept the report.
Super. In that case, we're moving on.
Madam Chair, item 7F for possible action, informational presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff regarding fiscal year 2018-19 and fiscal year 2019-2020 budgets. This is found on pages 91 through 98 of your packet, in addition to the presentation that is at your seat. Thank you very much, Mr. Kerwin. And I will be taking this item. So following discussions earlier this year, staff is bringing forward the preliminary budget discussion in December for feedback from the Regional Planning Governing Board. The direction that staff received was to bring this item forward in December, get feedback from the board. I also have meetings scheduled or in the process of being scheduled with management from the 3 jurisdictions so that I will be able to share this with them, as well as the feedback I received from you today. In fact, I'm looking forward to one of those meetings on Monday. So really quickly, budget revenues from 2005 to 2018. This is the bottom. I used this bottom line of 2005 because it's the last time we did a large regional plan update. As you can see, our revenue from the jurisdictions at that time equaled 1.2 million. That would equate to 1.6 million in today's dollars. And at last year, we received $737,000. I also would like to share, yikes, the revenue allocations for the past couple of years. So as you can see from the 3 jurisdictions, we kept a steady state budget from 2016 to 2017 in terms of the jurisdictional allocation, except for the fact that we also received a regional plan update allocation in 2017. This board at our conversation earlier this year suggested that TMRPA staff go away and create a budget that asked for our full range of needs. With that, TMRPA staff went away and developed a balanced budget. This organization has had an unbalanced budget and has been using the fund balance for the past 9 or 10 years. I understand that's something that a lot of jurisdictions have been doing, but based on the feedback here, that's what you see in the FY 2018-19 proposed allocations in revenue. And of course, as you know, following discussion, the final approval of jurisdictional allocations did include an allocation for the regional plan update, and you can see that in the final column on the right-hand side. Okay, really briefly, I also want to share with our budget expenses from 2005 to 2018. In 2005, we were looking at about 1.6 million, which in today's dollars is a little over 2 million. In terms of expenses, last year TMRPA is projected to come in at $942,000. To talk about that a little bit more, we've also included the budget estimate to complete in your packet. It's page 97 of your packet. As you can see, we are looking at getting 100% of our projected revenue and 99% of our projected expenditures. We anticipate that those are coming in. We had a deficit of $91,000 in the 18-19 budget allocated from the, excuse me, let me back up. We had a budget deficit of $91,000 in our 18-19 budget. That was covered using the fund balance. That represents a 52% reduction in our fund balance, the largest reduction since records are available from 2001. I was unable to go back previous to that. The conversation then, as you can see on page 97 of your packet, as I mentioned, is at the end of this fiscal year, we are projected to have $83,000 in our fund balance, or 7%. And with our additional projected liabilities, this would drop to $39,000 or a 3% fund balance. So let's talk a little bit about what work we need to do in fiscal year 1920. We will continue to need to process regional plan amendments, conformance reviews, have our statutory requirements, items as directed by the governing board, such as the conversation we had earlier today. But of course, our primary focus is going to be on implementation of the regional plan. And that brings us to, I know this is a little difficult to read on the screen, but you do have it in front of you, the regional plan update timeline. This is a reminder that we are working through the regional plan update as it stands right now. I'd like to draw your attention to December, which is where we are, which includes writing the draft plan, and in January we have identified review the draft plan with stakeholders, and we are on track with continuing to work on that. We definitely have sections of the plan already completed. Okay. Some other items that'll be in our fiscal year 1920 work plan will be the creation of the 2020 consensus forecast, and of course, continue to provide data and information to all of our regional partners, including the 3 jurisdictions. So in terms of talking about what TMRPA may need in the next fiscal year, staff has determined that we have a need for 1 full-time position. We have increased development activity and implementation from the update itself. At the moment, this position has been filled for the last 2 years as a contractor position. Conversation with legal has identified that, it's at this point in time probably best to move that position into the organization. We also have a need for increase in administrative support. So we recently had a shift in our bookkeeping and administrative support. So we've gone to some contractual bookkeeping, but at this point in time, we need a half to full-time position to help us with administrative items that the moment the staff are currently supporting. TMRPA also needs to hire or develop some primary clerking skills. While Mr. Kerwin does an excellent job at this, the current arrangement that we've had with a contractor for 15 years is no longer available due to changes in her situation and her son's health, and we need to develop some backup in that arena. Really quickly, our lease expires with RTC in March 2019. Initial conversations with RTC certainly identifies that they're interested in having us stay at the building. Obviously, if not, there would be quite a few costs, but we don't anticipate that that's probably going to happen given the fact that RTC has indicated that they're interested in us staying in staying at the building. Some additional potential expenses for 2019-20. So this is a follow-on. The first bullet's a follow-on from last year. The idea here is that software purchases, there's changes in licensing, and that we needed an increase in $10,000. That increase would be ongoing. So that was in this year's budget. That would be in next year's budget. We do have to update Microsoft Office, which is not a cheap program to continue to move forward with. The other potential topic here is potential funds for any type of implementation support for the regional plan update, whether that's in the form of training or other consulting. And I am in the process of discussing those projections with the consultant team currently. Until some choices are made with the regional plan update itself and we have a good sense of the work plan, we may find it difficult to get a full handle on that. Finally, some other FY 19-20 assumptions. So one of the suggestions TMRPA staff has is the potential to replenish the fund balance over the next 2 budgets. So not only fiscal year 19-20, but also fiscal year 2021. Certainly, we anticipate continuing the use of interns for our GIS and data work. Potential increase in healthcare costs. We receive our healthcare insurance from the city of Reno, and we are determining if that's going to potentially increase. A potential increase in staff. There had been conversation around a cost of living increase and or potential for merit or raises for the staff. Finally, the annual license for the MetroQuest survey tool, I wanted to share some information on that item. So for this fiscal year, originally this item was budgeted at $21,000, and that was not something that was considered acceptable. There was a negotiation with MetroQuest where the total was brought down to $15,000. We were able to split that 3 ways. RTC paid for $5,000 of that, and Washoe County paid for $5,000 of that. So instead of a $21,000 bill on that, we were able to have full access to MetroQuest for a $5,000 fee. If that's something that's available for next year, that's something that maybe the board would consider continuing to have. So the other item I'd like to talk about, just really quickly, jumping back to replenish the fund balance over the next 2 budgets. As a reminder, this year, we reduced our fund balance by $91,164. If you split that over 2 years, that's approximately $45,000 per year, and that would be split across the 3 jurisdictions, 40, 30, 30. Again, this is a proposed idea for you to talk about. Perhaps it's something you'd like to think about over 3 years. Perhaps it's not necessarily a priority at this point in time, but given the reduction in the fund balance, I felt it important to bring forward some potential assumptions and some potential ideas there. So my recommendation today is that the governing board discuss the items in the staff report, provide feedback to staff on this, and provide any feedback that you may want for us to consider in assumptions for additional budget development. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Executive Director, and I'm going to break with protocol and start this. I know I don't normally do that, but I do want to ask a question of Mr. Azevedo. So as I understand the way this committee is structured, it's structured in statute.
Yes, ma'am.
So the legislature has proposed that this committee must exist.
Yes.
And it has set out specific details and as to what the committee is responsible to do.
There are specific statutory functions for the agency, the board, and the commission, yes.
So it really is not then within the ability of the three entities to not fund this entity, correct?
Yes, ma'am. They have a, let me back up and develop that question a little more, if I may. It is incumbent upon this body to adopt a budget, and then once that budget is adopted, based on a pro rata split, based on the membership of this board, the local governments are required to fund it, and the local governments cannot not fund it. We went through that issue previously.
Okay, so one other thing that I did not bring up when we were talking about the update of the plan, the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update. One of the things that I understand to be clear in our requirement is that we must make sure the plan works for the region.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. In fact, there's a statement of legislative intent for this particular body that the actions this body takes in all the local jurisdictions who are affected entities act in harmony with each other. So it even goes further.
Which I think we're capable of doing these days. And I'm very happy to say that, by the way. I see this group as a team that's really working together well. I am concerned, though, that we make sure that as we look and comment on this budget and where we're going to go with this budget, that we keep those factors in mind. I think it's extremely important for us to remember that we have, this regional plan is going to make some changes. Once it's approved, it's going to make some changes in how we do business here, and it's going to be incumbent upon this board to make sure that we are following through on all of those things. And we've got some super top-notch people on this board who really understand the complexities of this issue. We've got Commissioner Herman, who is very knowledgeable on the rural issues. We have someone from the school district. We have Commissioner Bobzian, who probably knows the legislature as well as or better than any of the rest of us. Maybe not because he wants to, but because he's stuck with it. We have a Commissioner Weber who served 12 years on the county commission and now is serving on the city council. So we have some people on this commission who really have good, solid understanding of this community and where we have to go on it. And of course, we can't, I neglected to mention Commissioner Dewar, who probably knows as much about mining as anybody around here. So, and an aspect of that is in our greater Washoe County, so.
Maybe water too?
And water too, certainly water. She knows a great deal about water. And and of course, you can't forget Commissioner Hartung, who's probably top-notch on our gray water and other issues like that. So we've got some real key players on this committee, and I hope that we will work as a team to develop something that's really going to be great. And part of that is going to be this budget. So with that, I will turn it over to anybody who wants to comment. Commissioner Hartung.
I just have a question, Kim. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. And I'm sorry, the slide doesn't have a number. RTC lease and shared work program. So the lease expires in 2019. If the lease is renewed, potential monthly increase. If lease is not renewed, TMRPA must allocate the following. So these are the things that we would have to deal with potentially if we were to move.
That is correct.
Okay, so, given that, what do they want? Jeremy for a week out of the month to crunch numbers? Is that, you're our bargaining chip. I'm sorry, Dr. Smith.
Oh, gee, just what he always wanted.
And not that everybody else isn't isn't extremely valuable. It's you just you have the numbers that they're interested in. So I mean, I guess here's really the question that I'm asking: is there any potential that the lease might not be renewed? Is there an appetite? Does it seem as if there's an appetite that the lease may not be renewed?
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Certainly, the conversations that we have had with RTC lead us to believe that there is not the appetite. There is the appetite to continue the lease.
Good, okay.
There's the appetite for us to stay where we are located. That being said, short of a crystal ball, I can't confirm that that's the case, and I felt that it was incumbent upon me to identify that the shared work program with RTC does include things such as our telephone system, our ongoing computer support, and so if we were to move from that location, it would cost more than just an increase in rent. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
So I guess all I'm suggesting is if it seems as if that might be an imminent prospect, I would highly suggest that you reach out to an RTC board member.
Who happens to serve on your board also.
I wonder who
And
that might be.
we'll get it agendized, and we'll talk about it at the board level. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner
Take it any
Hartung.
way that you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bybee?
On that same thought with the lease, is there a possibility, so we don't have to look at this every year, of having a longer lease than 1 year? Is RTC up for a 2 or 3 year possible lease, so we don't have to sit in limbo not knowing? Or does RTC not know if they're going to be in the building for 2 or 3 years, I guess? That would be the question. Yeah, so is that possibility of a 2 to 3 year lease?
Member Bybee, they do indeed own the building, and given Commissioner Hartung's generous offer, I would suggest that that is a conversation that we bring forward to RTC as well, is a longer-term lease. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Sounds good. I know that I've asked Kim to make sure she meets with our managers, and I see our Sparks manager is here in the audience today, and I've asked her to meet with our managers, and I know she's putting that together and planning on that to go over the whole budget. As you guys all are aware, we asked Kim last year to bring this back to us in December and start the process early, and that's what she's done. So, and we do need a motion to recommend that, do we have any public comment?
We have none for this item.
Okay, so we need a motion to recommend that TMRPA staff develop a fiscal year budget.
Motion to recommend.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 8A for possible action, members and directors' reports. Would you like to go first?
I will go first because I want to take the opportunity to welcome Councilwoman Bonnie Weber, who was elected to a position on the City Council and is now the representative on the Regional Governing Board, and we certainly welcome you and are so glad to have you. Thank you. Madam Executive Director, do you have anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, your next regularly scheduled meeting is for Valentine's Day 2019, so February 14th. In addition to that, as was mentioned previously, we will be looking at asking for a joint meeting with the RPC in January. We will send that out to you in terms of a doodle poll, and we will send out the full year of Outlook calendar appointments to you as well. With that, those are my comments.
Do we have a legal report?
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with a report?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hartung.
And either Ms. Dewar or myself can give you an update on this, but we had a great presentation from the Effluent Management Group today, which is a very salient conversation to have at this board at some point in the not-too-distant future.
Good.
It'll be a game changer for our region, and it's good because we're all focused in the same direction.
Super. Thank you. Anything else? Are there any requests for future agenda? Oh, a report from our.
Hold it, Ms. Dewar.
I had an agenda.
Commissioner Dewar? Oh, you have an agenda? Okay, first we have to do our Board of Trustees from Washoe County member report.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things. We have approved and put out to bid a construction contract for the new Arrow Creek Middle School. Just as kind of a fun note, and you probably saw it in the newspaper, the board selected a name for the new elementary school in Spanish Springs, which will be named the John Bohatch School in remembrance of an exceptional Reno police officer who is very dedicated to children and who was killed in the line of duty. We are currently surveying the community. This is important information for all of you to have, that we're currently, actually today, the press release went out to survey the community regarding the placement of a new elementary school in Cold Springs. And again, thanks to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and their hard work, the school board approved a $40 million renovation capital improvement program through 2019 and 2020. And that's going to be a very important opportunity for many of our schools that are in serious need of revitalization and renovation. So that's some updates for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Dewar had an agenda item for.
Agenda item. Excuse me. This is really a takeoff on our earlier conversation, and we're not going to talk about it now, but I'm requesting for it to be put on a future agenda item or for the legislative subcommittee's consideration. And that is this issue we brought up earlier about state and university facilities and how they fit. I know historically they don't have to get any kind of approvals. I understand it's in state law, it will require a law change potentially. Maybe there could be, and we don't have a bill here at this group, to my knowledge. So it's really a process of working with the legislature to see about, many of them now have had experience at the local level, whether for county or city, and they know the impacts of big projects coming down and how those fit in. So it would really just be an agenda item to talk about this issue of state and university facilities, which are apparently exempt from local planning processes. And even if they remain exempt, if there could be increased collaboration in some way, a conversation, a notification, a comment period, and anything.
Something. Good.
Something. Even if it doesn't result in a law change, it might end up, we discuss it here, and maybe we recommend some dialogue process.
Good point.
So, what's that?
I said good point.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I agree. Also, since Commissioner Hartung brought up the issue on effluent, I think that might be a good item to put on our agenda also for presentation.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, and I think staff would love to do that. But I also have another legislative item that has been brought to my attention. It's probably been brought to yours also. The car dealers would like us to revisit the way sales tax is paid on automobiles, so that rather than it being a point of purchase, it's where you register the automobile. It's where the automobile resides that the sales tax gets paid.
Yeah,
which would give a level playing field.
Yeah, for those of you who might not have had the pleasure of speaking with the automobile dealers, the Washoe County has seen a 7.5% decrease, and
In automobile sales.
in automobile sales,
Yes.
in sales tax, a 7.5% sales tax decrease, and Carson City has seen a 12.5% increase, which is, of course, what they said all along, and I think their point of sale issue is valid. Do we need the money? Yes, we need the schools desperately, so we need the money, that's not an issue, but the point of sale argument, I think, is a valuable argument, because that's a significant amount of money that's impacting our school fund as well as all of our budgets.
It's just
So-
where the vehicle resides.
Yeah.
If your address is a Washoe County address when you purchase, that's where you pay the sales tax.
Right. Okay. Anything else? And so then we will go to final public comment.
I had two individuals, I believe they both left, but Wesley Griffin, Ty Crawford.
Yeah, it looks like they left. Okay. So we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Do we have any written correspondence, Madam
No, ma'am, we don't.
Executive Director? All right. Then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.